Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wednesday night edition of Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 9th of April 2025. Just a beautiful day here in Cincinnati. For the first time, no real rain. Hopefully, all the floods can start to cease and desist over here because it started to wreck some homes, some neighborhoods, some cities. It actually hit the parking lot of the players that play for the Cincinnati Bengals at Paycor Stadium. Hopefully, that starts to get resolved and taken care of, and hopefully, we can have some peace when it comes to some of the weather over here because it's been absolutely abysmal over the last few days. Again, for those who are here in Cincinnati, please use caution on the roads because they're still not 100% yet. Hopefully, when we get some sunshine this weekend, we start to have some of this floods and water start to go away. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day. I'm going to go ahead and get right down to it here real quick. Minutes ago, it was the return of Luka Doncic to Dallas. You can see on Luka Doncic's face that the trade still bothered him because he wanted to be a Mav for life. I mean, the tribute was just absolutely surreal, absolutely amazing. Standing ovation, well-deserved. We consider that he was the marquee name for Dallas after the retirement of the great Dirk Nowitzki and still kept Dallas on the map. And you could almost hear the ovation from the fans. He was a fixture in Dallas until this character called Nico Garrison happened, and we know what happened there. The inexcusable trade to the Lakers without giving a valid reason. And right now, I mean, the Dallas Mavericks are paying for it, and Luka is about to go into the playoffs with LeBron James and the Lakers. But I thought the tribute was very nice to a guy who kept Dallas on the map after Dirk Nowitzki retired and hit his decline in his career and still became the face of Dallas. Of course, last year led him to the NBA Finals in a 4-1 series loss to Boston. Played very well, but just got no help as a result of it. But it was a nice tribute from the city of Dallas to the franchise of that team for the last several years before the trade happened. And there's still ongoing questions and answers as to why that trade happened. And you can almost see the look on Luka's face. It got to him a little bit because that tribute video was just absolutely touching for him. And he's always going to be a part of the Mavs community. And basically, the game tonight feels like a Lakers home game because every time Luka touches the ball, the Dallas crowd just goes absolutely nuts. Actually, they showed a picture of a Dallas fan who wore a Luka Doncic jersey, but just putting a masking tape and write the letter Lakers on it to show who he really supports. I mean, the Dallas fans and fan bases basically just had it with the franchise when Mark Cuban and Nico Garrison made the decision to get rid of Luka Doncic. And of course, there's still ongoing questions and inconclusive answers as to why the trade really happened. The answers have been so all over the place, but I'm not sure we're going to get any real answers as to why this happened. But kudos to the Dallas Mavericks and the city of Dallas for a heck of a tribute to a terrific guy in Luka Doncic. And Luka Doncic is still playing at a high level, especially out there in LA, where they've ascended to the 3 seed out west. I mean, these superstar trades were like this. We've seen ones that sort of been real head scratchers and ones that have all kinds of questions. But maybe this one might tip the iceberg of all of this, maybe of all time, given the player that was involved, a supposed generation talent, and maybe a top 5 player in the NBA. And for them to just basically give up on the guy for basically nothing outside of above average peanuts, that's the part that raises a lot of questions because the Dallas Mavericks shortchanged themselves and they basically said, you know, you can have Luka for basically nothing. That's what basically happened, and everyone in the NBA is still confused by it. Of course, speaking of another team in the NBA that needs to be talked about, it's the Phoenix Suns, who are mathematically eliminated from the postseason. I said all along, I mean, you have Devin Booker as your standout, understandably so. You get premier talent and Kevin Durant, still a top 20 player in the NBA. You could probably argue top 10. But when they made the acquisition to get Bradley Beal, that was basically the nail in the coffin. Because you tied the 3 guys in the luxury tax field of the NBA where the NBA, if you hit the luxury tax and the repeater tax, you're basically have your hands tied. And basically what happens is you can't put an adequate team around them. I mean, Kevin Durant's a standout talent, and so too is Devin Booker. In terms of scoring zeros, they're probably the top 5 in the NBA when they're on. But Bradley Beal was just a catastrophic failure when basically he wasn't out too much in Washington before Phoenix got him. And Phoenix was basically through the book to get him, and it just basically just backfired in their face to miss the season. And because of it, they couldn't put an adequate team around Phoenix, around those 3 guys. I mean, it's not like the NFL or Major League Baseball. You know, baseball doesn't have a salary cap. You can overly stock your teams like the Los Angeles Dodgers are doing. And it's not like the NFL where you can cut guys and bring them back and just cut guys to get under the cap to free some money to pick up free agents via, free agency or trade. In the NBA, you're tied to the contracts, and when players move, it's not just the players move, the contracts move. And it's basically almost like dollar for dollar, especially when you're the luxury tax threshold like the Phoenix Suns were. And if you're going to be the luxury tax threshold, you better start generating results. And the Phoenix Suns have not done that since they acquired Bradley Beal. Of course, Kevin Durant's supposed to be an pending free agent. Where he goes, it remains to be seen. There's a rumor floating around he would go to Boston, but that makes no sense for the Celtics, who probably are on their way to going back-to-back this season at the rate they're going. But it's a catastrophic failure for Phoenix when you make this trade because you couldn't do anything maneuver-wise with the roster because you were just so handcuffed cap-wise because the NBA salary cap, especially when you're in that tax threshold, becomes tougher and tougher to maneuver. You're basically stuck with veteran minimum contracts for players who are basically barely good enough to play in a usual 8 or 9-man rotation. And that's what Phoenix was stuck with. Might be time to take some real soul searching out there in Phoenix with this deal because that Bradley Beal trade was basically egg on their face and it backfired. And that's why they're missing the playoffs this season. I mean, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker done all they could. I mean, Durant's still a top 10 player when he's really right. Same with Booker. Durant's probably going to be going somewhere. Who knows? Booker's in the middle of his contract. So Phoenix is in a very interesting transitional phase, and I don't know what the direction is going to be for them. It's going to be an interesting offseason. We've had big threes in the NBA historically. We had, of course, the big 3 of Magic, Kareem, and Worthy when the Showtime Lakers. Of course, Bird, McHale, Parrish in Boston. Jordan, Pippen, and Grant, the first three-peat in Chicago. Of course, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker for the Spurs, who manages the cap well as the small market. And, of course, the more recent one of the recent decade was, of course, the Heatles over Miami with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, where they're already a luxury tax threshold, but you had 3 athletes near the peak of their careers, and Pat Riley, a master, found a way to manipulate the salary cap to where he could plug pieces around those 3 guys to get them to the 4 straight finals appearances with the time there before LeBron went to Cleveland. Phoenix doesn't have that luxury anymore, and who knows what they're going to do because that situation is just a hot mess. When you made that kind of an investment and it fails, time to do some real thinking. Now some brief talk of the NFL. Everybody over in Pittsburgh is all over the place with the supposed IG story of TJ Watt, where he throws up the peace sign. People are taking it as if he's going to leave the team or he's going to be traded or whatever. Unless someone throws the bank at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're not trading TJ Watt. I mean, maybe they should because you could probably get some kind of a draft capital and put some teams around him, and they owe TJ Watt to play for some form of a contender, which right now the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't. But they're not trading TJ Watt. You can say what you want about him. He's still the face of that defensive front in Pittsburgh. Still makes an impact opposite of a guy like Alex Highsmith and the defensive front who's still formidable. But a lot of overreaction going on in Pittsburgh. And unless someone throws a surreal package, they're not trading TJ Watt. I mean, they just forked out a second-round draft pick to get DK Metcalf from Seattle and sign him to that 5-year, $100-some-odd million contract. But they're not letting him go anywhere. They're not trading him anywhere simply because, he's the face of that defense. And I know Pittsburgh fans would like to see him play for a winner. Actually, once you just build a winner in Pittsburgh, just maybe find a way to not just win your 10 plus regular season games. Actually, put a team together that could do something in the postseason. Because if you're good enough to win regular season games, you should be able to do something in the postseason because that defense is good enough to win it. Might be time to have a different philosophy on the offensive side over there in Pittsburgh. And as much as I love and respect the heck out of Mike Tomlin as a fan of a division rival in Cincinnati, time for a little bit of accountability with him because this never having a losing season is basically just drawn out at this point. Now it's got to translate to something in the postseason. So maybe get a postseason win, which I think is doable because outside of Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas, the AFC is up in the air. But Pittsburgh is not trading TJ Watt. Everyone can cease and desist with that. A lot of people are suggesting that they should, but it depends what you get for him. I can't see them getting anything unless someone breaks the bank for him and basically just gives a deal that is just absolutely out of this mind. Reminds me of what's going on here in Cincinnati with Trey Hendrickson. You know the story here in Cincinnati. Not with the contract talks. They could probably trade him if they wanted to, but unless someone offers high draft picks, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh aren't moving Hendrickson and Watt respectively. So we'll see where that one goes. I mean, still a long off season. There's still the draft coming up. After the weekend, I will give my mock draft as I do some more researches. But as of right now, we're going to just move on into other subjects because the NFL is about to approach draft time. And of course, there's all the visits that's going on. Everyone's still wondering what the heck the 40-year-old coward known as Aaron Rodgers is going to do, which I think he's going to Minnesota. But we'll see what happens. But Pittsburgh is not trading TJ Watt. Everybody in Steeler Nation, you just need to calm down a little bit. Now to recent boxing news. It broke yesterday, and there's more fallout today. That the so-called governing body has Dimitri Bivol as one of the champions who officially vacated his title because the character David Benavidez was the so-called mandatory for a title shot he had no business getting. Bivol vacated the championship, and so what happens? There are all kinds of excuses all over the place. Well, first of all, let me just kill this real quick. Nobody is ducking anybody because nobody's afraid of a coward named David Benavidez. If you're a David Benavidez fan, you're every bit the coward he is. And it's basically 20 David Benavidez fans with like 30 burner accounts apiece on these X and Facebook platforms. You can't miss it. That's David Benavidez fans. They wrongfully accused Canelo Alvarez of ducking him, which never happened. Now they're accusing Dimitri Bivol of ducking him. That hasn't happened. It's a medium risk, low reward fight for both Canelo and Bivol if they took this, because they would probably just dust off the coward Benavidez basically effortlessly without breaking a sweat. But the reward for doing it isn't going to get them anywhere. Now they're talking about, they say that from the character Mauricio Suleiman, that Dimitri Bivol supposedly turned down an $8 million offer, which, is probably $8 million in monopoly money, not real money. So we know how credible Mauricio Suleiman is, but we know the story why this situation happened, because a couple years back when Bivol and Artur Beterbiev was being talked about for the undisputed title, it was Suleiman who made this ridiculous phrase, or whatever you want to call it, that he would not sanction a Beterbiev-Bivol fight because Bivol was Russian. You guys know the political aspect of Russia and whatever. You guys can use your platforms for it. I won't use mine. But he blunt said he would not approve of a Artur Beterbiev Dimitri Bivol undisputed championship simply because Bivol is Russian. That's probably, actually, I won't say it's probably, it's definitely the reason why this happened. Don't think for one second Dimitri Bivol didn't know this, because that is part of, actually, the part and the reason why that happened yesterday. Has nothing to do with David Benavidez, because no one's afraid of David Benavidez. It has to do with the fact that Dimitri Bivol knew what came out of Jose Suleiman's mouth. Actually, there's a letter that came out from Bivol's attorney aimed at Mauricio Suleiman, and it is rather nasty. And basically, Mauricio Suleiman got it with both barrels from both Dimitri Bivol and his attorney. Those of you guys in the X platform can read it. Someone had to post it. I would say it's Dan Rafael, but I'm not giving that coward the time of day. Maybe someone like an Al Bernstein who's more respectable than Rafael could have it. But it is out there. It is sought. You guys can read it for yourselves. There is no ducking going on simply because David Benavidez wanted this. He did not want to go out and fight a champion for a championship. He wanted to win the email championship. He did it for the second straight division. Did it at 168, did it at 175, and he got the rankings because he never did anything of significance to earn it. And that is where David Benavidez fans fail to see the truth. I mean, you guys can celebrate fake belts all you want because we know David Benavidez is officially the fake light heavyweight champion. And David Benavidez fans celebrate fake belts like it's the greatest thing they've ever saw. And now we have a fake light heavyweight champion in David Benavidez, but we know who the real champion is. That's Dmitry Bivol. We know who the real contender is for Dmitry Bivol. That is Artur Beterbiev, and they're going to fight it for a third time. Bivol said he's going to honor the third fight, and he's going to go through with it. Kudos to him for sticking to his word. And now Benavidez is the fake light heavyweight champion because he got it via the email route, simply because nobody wants to pony up the dollars to fight a guy who's basically a medium risk, low reward type of fighter. And that's who David Benavidez is. Because Bivol would probably mop the wing with him. I mean, it's a no-brainer. He could do it without breaking a sweat. But what's the gain out of it for Dmitry Bivol? Very little, if any. That's the low reward aspect of it. Dmitry Bivol knows the game better than 90% of the David Benavidez fans, which is basically about 19 of them. And of those 19 of the 20, they have like 50 burner accounts on the X and Facebook platforms. Anybody knows this. So spare me your hypocrisy, David Benavidez fans. Nobody is ducking him. If anyone's doing the ducking, it's him because he wanted to win the belts via the email route. He didn't want to compete against elite level competition. He hasn't fought an elite level opponent really in his career. No, I'm not giving him credit for beating Alexander Gvozdyk because he was already wiped out by Artur Beterbiev. And beating an 11-fight fighter in David Morrell does nothing for Benavidez either. When he starts fighting real legit competition and starts stepping up like a man with a pair, then we can have conversations. He hasn't done that yet because he doesn't have the Jones to fight legit opposition up to this point. And for Bivol to do what he did, to just simply go all Riddick bow and throw the belt in the garbage can because of how pathetic the governing body is and how they enforced a mandatory that had no business taking place, Dmitry Bivol deserves kudos. Nobody is afraid of David Benavidez. All the David Benavidez fans need to flat out shut up and cease to exist right now because you guys have no leg to stand on. Period. Actually, the only logical fight at the light heavyweight division is Bivol Beterbiev 3. I know a lot of people don't clamor for it, but if you think Bivol Benavidez is the other option, I highly recommend you shut your mouth and get checked for CTE. Come back to me for results because you guys are bona fide morons if you think that is the case. That's why I stopped dealing with a lot of people in the boxing community in recent weeks. A lot of stupidity. Now, actually, I'm going to touch on one subject real quick because I got to address this because last night my system didn't go great because when I talked about the great Bob Foster, there were David Benavidez fans coming out of the woodworks who think David Benavidez could compete with Bob Foster. If you legitimately think David Benavidez can hang with a guy like Bob Foster or even any of the guys Bob Foster beat, shut your mouths, get off these apps, go check into a mental insane asylum, go get investigated and check for CTE. And if they say why, tell them it's because you're stupid enough to think David Benavidez can beat Bob Foster. Get the results, bring them to me so I can help you because you desperately need it. That's just next level stupidity. Now we're going to go into a way back machine. Historical significance. And usually I like to talk about historical significance to help, especially the David Benavidez fans who don't get the business aspect of the sport. We're going to go back 110 years. We're going to make a trip to Havana, Cuba. This is for the heavyweight championship of the world. This was Jess Willard fighting the champion, the always feared Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was the most feared fighter at the time, had the distinction of the greatest heavyweight ever, Mind you, this is before guys like Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, among others that came around. He fought Jess Willard, who is a unique specimen, a 6'6" fighter with an 84-inch reach, a very strong pressure fighter who had a good, strong punch volume, but nobody thought he would stand much of a chance against Jack Johnson, because Jack Johnson was one of the more brutal fighters. We know the story when he won the title from Tommy Burns in Australia. We know all the barriers that broke. I'm not going to use the particular platform to discuss it, but I'm sure you guys can research and figure that out. It was on this particular night when Jack Johnson basically almost, to an extent, actually made back up. He actually did meet his match, because it started out like Jack Johnson was going to control this fight and going to be Jack Johnson. He did anything and everything he wanted to for at least the first 6, 7, 8 rounds of this fight. But as the fight was starting to wear on and the hot heat in Havana, Cuba took place, Jess Willard's pressure started to take over, and it started to show on Jack Johnson. Gradually, it started physically and mentally, piece by piece, one by one. And basically what happened at this point is the fight started to take a turn, and we start to get into the rounds 15 through 20, and then to the 20th and to the 25th. Then we start to see a real takeover from Jack Johnson, and that was basically actually back up from Jess Willard, and that's when Jack Johnson was really in trouble. So what happens as the rounds continue to show, the fatigue on Jack Johnson's body begins to show, and Willard just continued to pressure and pressure and pressure, and his size started to take its toll. We're going to fast forward to the 26th round of a scheduled 45-round fight. Back then, fights were scheduled in ridiculous number of rounds. This is round 26 out of 45. It was the right hand, which was basically the staple punch of Jess Willard, that hit Jack Johnson, and Johnson was down and out for the count. And Jess Willard wins the heavyweight championship of the world. Again, this was the one belt era, when you got the one belt and it was all the king of the mountain. And Jess Willard achieved this 110 years ago in Havana, Cuba in 1915. Jack Johnson's legacy was still intact. I mean, when he beat Tommy Burns, had the great win over Jim Jeffries, among others. But it was the end for him when he fought Jess Willard in Cuba. Despite a good start where he was still Jack Johnson, just took control of the early rounds of that fight, Willard just gradually kept the pressure on, and just slowly but surely wore out Jack Johnson. And a very, very hot day in Havana, Cuba, to where in the 26th round, it was the right hand that put Johnson down and out for the count. And Jess Willard became the heavyweight champion of the world. Two amazing stories here for you guys to read about Johnson and Willard. Willard did win a championship, but it was 2 fights later, actually almost exactly 4 years to the day he won the title. He met an iconic heavyweight, a fellow known as a Manassa Mauler named Jack Dempsey, and that was his endgame, because Dempsey does demolish Willard from rounds 1 to 3, which where Willard quit on the stool at the end of the 3rd round, amidst some wild allegations that took place that there was basically loaded hand wraps in Jack Dempsey. That was debunked. Reason being, it was the fact that Jess Willard's manager was recently fired by Jack Dempsey, and basically what happened was he used the accusation he couldn't stand the fact that Jack Dempsey just gave Jess Willard the beating of his life. And that's what Jack Dempsey did throughout the 20s, throughout his career. Jess Willard is not going to be on everyone's all-time lists simply because, he didn't have the body of work or the reign. Just after he won the title from Johnson, his second title defense, he was just walloped by Dempsey, but made history because I don't know what the odds would have been then, because there was no such thing as Vegas odds in the early 1900s. But Jess Willard did shock Jack Johnson, who was basically like a Sonny Liston, a Mike Tyson, and a George Foreman at that time. A guy that it was very intimidating and very imposing, to where, you think he was borderline invincible. Jess Willard showed otherwise. But, a shocking moment, an all-time shocker in heavyweight boxing history. The upset in boxing history at the time. Remember, this is before we had upsets like Dick Tiger over Jose Torres, Cassius Clay over Sonny Liston, and of course, the kingpin of them all, Buster Douglas over Mike Tyson. That's what Jess Willard over Jack Johnson was in 1915 in Cuba. Great win for the great Jess Willard. I mean, no one's going to put him in the all-time greats, but he certainly was great. Jack Johnson's going to probably be in the top 10 just because of his historical significance for many reasons. Because I said we're not talking about guys like Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, among others. If it wasn't for Joe Louis back in 1908 beating Tommy Burns for the heavyweight championship of the world. Amazing stories from these guys back in the day. I mean, it's like a trickle effect when you talk about historical significance from the 1900s all the way as you go on to what we're living in right now. It's amazing stuff. And I conclude on another historical night and another iconic figure that was introduced to the boxing world. In the cruiserweight division, the cleanup took place. It was Evander Holyfield demolishing Carlos de Leon to win the undisputed cruiserweight championship in an 8th round knockout. We know the story here. Wiped out the cruiserweight division after he won the bronze medal in the 84 Olympics. Basically just not beat basically every name they put in front of him. De Leon was basically the end, which is basically the cleanup of the division. And Evander Holyfield at the time ascended to the number 1 stature of the greatest cruiserweight in the history of that division. And you consider that the division didn't really have much of a history. That basically means whatever you want to interpret it as. But still to have that number 1 distinction in the history of the division says a whole lot for the career accolades of a fighter, especially one of Evander Holyfield's stature. Everybody knows what followed after this. The trip up to heavyweight, the hard pursuit to fight Mike Tyson, through all the bad blood with the promoters, through all of the turmoil in and out of the ring with involved Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield kept pursuing and pursuing and pursuing. He didn't stop pursuing while Mike Tyson was doing whatever the frick it was Mike Tyson was doing. Evander Holyfield moved up to heavyweight, became the number 1 contender, had the right hand that just pasted Buster Douglas on the canvas to win the title the first time. The trilogy with Riddick Bowe, was probably the greatest trilogy aside of Ali Frazier in the heavyweight division. The demolishing of Burt Cooper in 1991. The 2 fights with George Foreman and Larry Holmes. And of course, when he came back in 95, the great give and take fight with Ray Mercer. Till we finally had Holyfield Tyson in 96. Everybody knows the story there. Mike Tyson ducks Lennox Lewis, thinking he was going to fight a used up and washed up Evander Holyfield, or he's going to get a 90-second knockout. It backfired. Holyfield just beat the brakes off of Tyson from start to finish to where the fight was stopped in the 11th round. And Evander Holyfield was the heavyweight champion of the world of that night. Finally getting the man he wanted the day he went up to the heavyweight division in early 1988. And you could probably say that was almost like a 7 to 8 year buildup when you consider everything that went on in and out of the ring for both fighters. More so Mike Tyson with his prison sentence, and of course faking the rib injury in 1991. And Evander Holyfield finally got him, finally capitalized on the opportunity. Of course, his career pursued on after that. Got a revenge win over Michael Moore where he looked spectacular. The 2 fights with Lennox Lewis, even though the first fight, he was gift wrapped a draw. We know what happened, the story with that one. But came back with a respectable effort in the second Lewis fight, even though he lost the decision. But maybe the end for him was the second Lennox Lewis fight because he could never come close to even looking half as good against any kind of a legit opponent after that. Like all the other fighters, carried on longer than he should. Had an irrelevant trilogy with John Ruiz that made no sense. Got thoroughly outboxed by Chris Bird. But Evander Holyfield's legacy, I said all along, was from when he went to the cruiserweight division to when he beat Mike Tyson the first time. That was his legacy. I mean, fought everyone they wanted to put him in against. And from that period, beat everyone they put him in against. Because he did get the revenge on Riddick Bowe in 93 after losing to him in 92. A give and take warrior who backs down from no one, always gives an honest effort, and that honest effort was more than good enough for the public because they loved his big heart. I mean, his heart probably weighed as much as he did. I mean, he weighed in most fights like 210 to 215. Probably his heart was probably about 205 pounds. That should tell you the heart of Evander Holyfield. Definitely a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. We think about the heavyweights all-time in that division. We think about, of course, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, Jack Dempsey, Jack Johnson. You can go, guys, of course, like George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Rocky Marciano, among many, many others. That basically is him in that category. He's certainly a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. I mean, to win the legit championship 3 times in that division says it all right there for him. I mean, the 2 Lewis fights, you could probably say, were after their expiration date, because at the time, feuding networks and feuding promoters prevented that fight from happening for the longest time. And of course, there was a lot of obstacles that prevented those 2 fights from happening. But it was fitting that it was those 2 guys, Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield, closing out the 20th century when they had a 2-fight series in '99. But Evander Holyfield's place in history is forever secure. A lot of weird accusations from especially Mike Tyson fans, because they can't accept the fact that Mike Tyson could never carry Evander Holyfield's jockstrap. Anybody with a functioning brain knows this, because for a simple reason, no fear. Evander Holyfield was never afraid of Mike Tyson from the beginning to the middle to the end. I said all along, any version of Evander Holyfield handles any version of Mike Tyson without breaking a sweat, simply because he would never be afraid. He always wanted Mike for one reason, and we saw what happened November 9th, 1996 at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And Evander Holyfield's legacy that night, forever secure. He's definitely a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. Boy, I wish I could go back to talking about more heavyweight championship boxing like this, because it was the most fun thing maybe ever. Because there was a time when all of the sports shows, ESPN, CNN Sports, among many others, would always highlight the heavyweight championship of the world as the main topic of the sports shows. Those days are forever gone. I could point to a lot of reasons for it. I'm not going to divulge into them, but there are a lot of reasons why that's happened. And right now, every one of the fight games should be happy we're still getting fights of some significance. But there was a time when you could see all of those big names, Holyfield, Tyson, Bo Lewis, the comebacking Foreman, among many others, as the number 1 news story in the sport of boxing, and hit all the sports news waves all over the place. We're never going to get those days back, are we? We're probably not. The sports is so diluted with political aspects and governing bodies, and among many other things. And that's why I don't give any kind of credence to anything unless it's of superior significance. But I haven't seen anything of superior significance of this day. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 9th of April 2025. I will be back tomorrow night. As always, make self-care your number 1 priority in life. Take care of yourself first before you take care of anything else. You take care of yourself first, good things will come to you. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else in life matters. Speaking from personal experience myself. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.